Now let's go over some basic M1 moves. M1s are the focal point of your entire show. And so you want to spend the majority of your time practicing your M1 moves. This light is a solid light. There's no gap in it. And so it shows every single one of your flaws, which means you got to be intentional, you got to be precise, and you got to be clean. You really have to have exact finger placement. So if your thumb is out, it can't be hanging down like this. It can't be pointed up like this. It's got to be exactly where you want it. And you really got to have the exact grid placement so that the viewer can comprehend what's happening. This is one reason why impacting is so hard, because it takes a lot of time to get that placement down. And most people don't want to spend that much time perfecting the small details of their show. Now, because these are your main characters, a lot of the M1 moves you do are going to be cause and effect based. And that's because you're either presenting this light or you're using this character to control the other hand. And most of the time when you're presenting this light, you want your thumb to be fully out and fully visible. And so I want you to get comfortable, very comfortable with this position right here. This is going to be the first M1 that you learn, and this is presented fully out. Now, from this position, you could do a lot of different things. You can present it along the grid, along the X plane. You can move it along the Z plane. You can move it along the Y plane. So get comfortable moving it along this grid. And remember, it's all about presentation. And so when you're moving it like this, when you're moving it like this, you just want to make sure that it's presented right. You can also present it down your arm. So if we're doing a little cause and effect, we pull it back, and then we present it down our arm and we open our other hand. Right? This is still just presentation along the grid, but now we're adding a little bit of cause and effect. You can also finger tut around this position. So you could do things like this. You could go 3D. You could wave tut around it. You can go diagonally like this. Just get comfortable with the different presentations of this M1. Now, after you're comfortable with those different positions, the next thing you could do is you could pivot your hand. And this opens up a whole new range of possibilities. So from here, you could pivot downward. You could pivot up like this. So let's say we're back here. Now we're presenting like this. You could pivot the whole thing, and then you could present it like this. You could trace your arm back, lower this thing down, and then go like this. Right? Just with this pivot move, there's so many variations that you could do now. Now you could wave tut like this, pivot this, wave tut like this, pivot it. You could do some finger tuts like this. So now that you know this presentation and the pivot, there's a whole bunch of different moves that you could do. One thing to remember is, again, if you're going from this position to this pivot position, you want your placement on the grid to be exact. And so you don't want it like this. You don't want it like this. You want it like this. And if you're coming back down here, you want it like this. Now, the next basic M1 move is the hidden light. And Skittles calls these the flashlight. Whatever it is, it's just your thumb inside of your fist like this. So with this move, again, there's so many variations you could do. You could shine it in their face. You could move it along the grid like this. You can shine it on your arm and trace. And with this one, you could even pivot it as well, right? So pivot like this, pivot like this. And if we want to add some cause and effect, right? Bring the whole thing down, pivot, pivot, use the grid, pivot. And again, I can't stress this enough, precise placement is key. So if you're shining it at them, make sure you're shining it at them. You don't want it pointed off to this side, pointed off to this side. You want it directly at them. And if you're shining it down on your hand, you want to make sure that it's on the grid on your hand and that it's not like pointed off this way or pointed off this way. You want it exact. So with these two moves, the thumb out and the thumb in, along with the different pivots, You can construct an entire show. But remember, the key is you want exact placement every time. And so one exercise that will help you with that is practice thumb out, thumb in, thumb out, thumb in. And you want it exactly in the same spot every time. Not up like that, not down like this. You want it straight out, straight out, straight out, straight out. And so practice that exercise until you're really comfortable with that exact placement. And then try it like this. It's gonna be a little different. You want it straight up. You don't want it to the sides. Straight up, straight up. And these exercises will really help you get your M1 placement down. Make sure you do it with both hands. Don't rush through this. Build up that muscle memory, and it's gonna help your show in the long run. Now, the third basic M1 is the knuckle rule. And that's very simple. All you do is kind of roll the light through your knuckle. And it looks pretty cool because it's like, oh, you know, like it's the character and it's like crawling through the knuckles. You could either just roll it out like this, or you could do like an isolation roll where the light kind of stays in one position and you rotate your whole arm around it. This is a move that a lot of beginners use and that they rely on way too much because it is very easy to do and it looks really cool. You just don't want to rely on this because if you do it too much, it gets really predictable and repetitive. And again, you want your impact shows to be surprising. So this is a great move. You could totally practice this. You could totally use it in your shows. Just don't rely on it too much. So in summary, I taught you 3 different M1 basics that you can build an entire show around. That is the fully presented out, the flashlight, along with those different pivot variations, and the knuckle roll. And when you mix in different cause and effect with your shows, you can have a killer impact show. So your action item is practice this in and out exercise where you pop them out, boom, 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 and then practice it sideways as well. And just make sure your placement is the exact same every time, because once you get this down, your shows are gonna hit.